because our next guest has been, somebody who has been not only, politically active, he's out there as an activist trying to educate people on many different levels. And he really is a form of a role model for our movement. And he really, he's an independent voter. He's out of New York. He's running for Congress. His name's Anthony Tolda. Anthony, you with us right now?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Hey, great to have you on the show. You're here with Mike Shanklin and James Cox on PFP Movement Radio. But I want to first thank you for being on the show. And when I heard you were going to be on the show, I started thinking about some of the different questions I could ask you, And, man, we have a bunch of great topics what we're going to talk about over the next 45 minutes here. But I have to start off, and I think it comes natural with politics. We have to start off with the economy first and really take a look at what you would do to help us, on a federal level, since you are running for a federal seat, not only for that, but also for your state. What would you do to help us, with the economy and make sure that we cut back, as far as Federal Reserve? How do you feel on the Federal Reserve, and what would you do to help abolish programs? Which ones would you start with, too?
Well, yeah, I watch a lot of C-SPAN, and I see members from both sides of the aisle, asking Ben Bernanke and Tim Geithner questions, and they give half-truth answers. They blatantly refuse to answer questions, and then every once in a while you see them with this smug grin, like they're untouchable. And the way the laws are written right now, in a sense, they are untouchable, and that's a real problem. Well, in our Constitution, it's mandated that Congress has control over monetary policy, and they coin money in silver and gold. And I support a sound money option, which doesn't mean we would wave a magic wand and get rid of the Federal Reserve overnight, but you'd have the sound money option. If you want to store your wealth, your savings, your retirement in sound money and commerce day-to-day in Federal Reserve notes, you can do that. The idea is to audit the Federal Reserve, begin to shrink their powers, and basically wean our financial system off of being stuck dealing with them. Because if you look at a chart of how the dollar has performed from their inception to today, and you look at how gold has performed, it's extremely obvious that this is a real problem, and that's the root of the problem.
Right. Well, let's look at the Federal Reserve for a second here, and they basically have a monopoly control of credit. They can just print money out of thin air. Do you agree with that?
Yes, and I forget who said it, but it was one of the central bankers from way back, going back probably a couple of hundred years maybe, or 100 years, and he said that competition is a sin. And we're supposed to have competition. That's what capitalistic society is open competition, free markets. When you have people running the monetary policy that come from the school of thought that competition is a sin, that's the antithesis of a truly capitalistic system. So we think we have capitalism, but when you hear Ron Paul say, don't blame capitalism because we haven't had any, he's 100% right.
Yeah. And, I think, I wish more people would take him, and listen to him, what he has to say. And I know more people are today than they ever did. I mean, how long has he been saying this message, Anthony? It's been 30 years. I mean, the guy has been sticking by his principles for a damn long time. Let's be honest about this. But, I think you're absolutely right. We need to really get an audit of the Fed, and that'll eventually lead to what we, at least exposing this. I think transparency is the underlying here. Don't you agree that transparency is one of the, the most important steps we could take for our country, at least if we're going to have a government, to have transparency in it?
Exactly, and on all levels, not just monetary policy. You hear that the healthcare bill debates are going to be on C-SPAN, and then it's only an hour. And you hear that all the bills were going to be online for 72 hours before a vote, and then they dump 300 pages onto the cap and trade bill before it's voted on, and give even the representatives, I don't know what it was, 12 hours or even less for them to review the additional 300 pages. And if they want to hide something in legislation, well, what's the perfect way to do it? To sneak it in an extra 300 pages with no adequate time to go over it, or, in the case of the health care bill, to squeeze something in the middle of 2,500, plus or minus however many hundred pages. It's hard to keep up with because they keep altering it. But if you want to hide something really bad, of course, it's a lot easier for them to do it when you're dealing with thousands of pages of legislation.
James here, Anthony. Welcome to the show again. What's your views on foreign policy? What do you think we should do around the world, and most typically right now in the Middle East?
Well, it's been said that we need to define our enemy, and then the people that say that, that's a step in the right direction, but they're still not defining the enemy. And to me, the enemy, it's radical Islamic pirates, which is not to say I'm saying everybody that practices Islam is a radical. However, there is a radical, sect right now. Wahhabi Islam is, I believe, the most radical, and there's others out there too, and it needs to be dealt with. But they're not governments. We're fighting wars as if we would against the government. We're propping up civil wars in places that really haven't evolved very much in the past couple of 100 years. And we need to understand we're up against pirates. We're not up against governments. And there was what was called letters of marque and reprisal in the days of Thomas Jefferson, where they were dealing with pirates over north of Africa. And these letters of marque and reprisal have been endorsed by Ron Paul and by Chuck Baldwin. And what it would do is it would mandate special operations with specific targets, along with some private contractors, which we're already using the private contractors anyway. But this would just greatly reduce the amount of involvement cash-wise and the amount of involvement troop-wise. It would end the nation building, and we would go after the specific enemy as opposed to propping up restructuring of governments of whole countries, which is just, it's ridiculous. History has shown us it doesn't work, and if we have a choice right now. We can either change our foreign policy before or after we officially go bankrupt and faith is lost in the dollar and we lose AAA ratings on our bonds. Now, I, for one, would like to change it before rather than after.
Right. And, we have so many topics here. I'd like to stick on that, but I got to move on real quick, Anthony, because another hot topic that everybody is asking about is healthcare. And, everybody, it's obviously the big bill it's going through. Everybody knows about, what's going on with the healthcare bill. Where do you fall on this? What do you say we should do? The Republicans have their own unconstitutional healthcare bill, believe it or not. I mean, what's the prospects looking for us, and what would you do with the healthcare bill if you were in Congress?
Well, I would just vote no, basically, and encourage everybody else I could to vote no, and I would stand against it as often as possible. And now with this reconciliation in the Senate, there's some discussions that the Republicans are going to use an amending process, which is, it's not exactly the same as a filibuster because they won't be able to use a filibuster, but if they continue introducing amendments, they could delay the process and drag it out. But, as Congress doesn't exactly operate the same way, but it's good to see that the Republicans are trying to stop it. And I do know they have their own plan for health care that isn't exactly constitutional either. And, part of our problem with our system as a whole is the Republicans are looking more and more like what Democrats looked like years ago before they moved to the extreme far left. So you have the left moving to the extreme far left, and then the moderate left is what the left of old was, some of them, and then you have the right moving to what used to be the more conservative or moderate left, and only the center right is now being looked upon as the extreme right. We're just moving further and further left as a whole, and it seems like there really isn't much resistance on the right, or there isn't enough resistance on the right.
I have a couple of questions here, and it all relates back to, basically 9/11. You're up in New York, right, Anthony?
That's true, yes. Long Island.
Okay.
We're about a half an hour away from Manhattan, where I'm at in Huntington, give or take the traffic.
Okay. Let me ask you this: Do you think that something happened on 9/11? And this question's going to basically, hinge on the fact of, we have the Patriot Act now.